Really important. Please, 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 please do not. Hello, everyone. I'm Alan Brantley, and today I'm going to talk about how I transferred to Stanford and how you can too. In this video, I am going to talk about my experiences transferring into Stanford and give you some tips about how you can hopefully maximize your chances at transferring to Stanford. So first, a little bit about me. I had a pretty unstable childhood, moved around a lot. I went to 10 public schools by the time I was in the 10th grade. And at that point, I just kind of had enough of it, and I dropped out of high school in the 10th grade. You know, predictably, it was only a few years before I was getting in trouble with the law. I was arrested for some drug charges and ended up spending some time in jail in my early 20s. And during that time in jail, I earned my GED because they offered me 3 days of good time, which I never actually got, but it was a good experience. And I learned about the Pythagorean theorem for the very first time. And that is something that would eventually play prominently in my education and math career, and even in my introduction into math before I started college. Got out of jail, you know, at the age of 22, fumbled around a while. I lived in the southern United States, and I moved from Mobile, Alabama to California following Hurricane Katrina. And so I lived in Bakersfield for a while, continued to fall, developed a pretty serious alcohol problem, and eventually started using meth. And that meth habit, along with my alcohol abuse and just some other general instability, I was getting evicted out of everywhere I lived and pretty much ended up, sleeping on couches. And, my meth addiction eventually brought me to LA, where I am now. In those days, I was in a town called Montebello, and, I let my meth addiction thrive. I lived on the floor in an old barber shop that had been essentially converted into a storage room, and I lived in that place for about 2 years. While I was there, I had pretty much given up on life. It seemed, at 30 years old, addicted to meth, not even a high school degree, not able to hold a job for longer than 2 years, no skills to speak of, and basically homeless. It seemed over for me, and I'd given up. But as the saying goes, it's always darkest before the dawn, and that was certainly true for me. Also, while I was there, I developed a keen interest in physics, geometry, and eventually mathematics. And after finding a little bit more stability, I started to study mathematics, trying to learn it on my own using Khan Academy. And I did that for a while, but eventually got bored, lost interest. That lasted a couple of months tops. But eventually I decided to enroll in community college as a math major. So I go to Fullerton College, I take the placement test and test into pre-algebra, which means if I'm going to be a math major, I've got 2 years essentially of prereq work to do before I can even take my major college classes. So I spent, 4.5 years in community college and transferred to Stanford as a math major. And eventually I earned a bachelor's of science at Stanford, not in math, but in engineering and product design. Eventually I earned a master's degree in product innovation from USC's Iovine and Young Academy, a school founded by Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre. And that's where I find myself now. And one thing that I'm very, very passionate about is transfer. And another thing I'm very, very passionate about is helping other people achieve their transfer goals, but not only their transfer goals, the things that you want to do in life. How can you overcome your adversity in life? What was your rock bottom? What was your darkest before the dawn moment? And where are you now? And how can you take that, leverage it and turn it into your goals and dreams. So that's really what I'm about. And that's what this channel hopefully will end up being about. Okay, so can you go to Stanford? Yes, you can, especially if you're just starting your community college career. So for those people who are watching this, if you're just getting into community college and you want to go to Stanford, excellent. You have it within the power to put yourself in a position to make yourself competitive. Okay. And so if you're entering into your community college career, you want to be thinking about the effort that you're going to be giving to your time while you're there so that you can make yourself competitive, not only at Stanford, but at any school you're planning on applying to, right? And also, don't take bad advice. People are going to tell you that, they're going to talk to you about the percentage rate to get into Stanford for transfers. And it's true. It's a low percentage rate. The chances of getting in are very small, but I don't want you to be thinking about that. I want you to be thinking about how you can make yourself the most competitive as possible so that you can give yourself a good shot at getting in. And people are going to try to discourage you. And it's true. You do have to be realistic. So it's important that you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. It's important that you're applying to other schools. And it's important that if you are going to apply to Stanford, that it's a good fit, right? You don't need to go to Stanford if it's not a good fit or if your field of study isn't something that's best learned at Stanford. Yes, you need to be realistic, but also aim high. And so what I say is shoot for the moon, hit a star if you miss, right? Like at least you're going to be out of the stratosphere and you're going to be up there. So aim high, miss high, you'll do great. And the most important statistic that I think people should know about getting into Stanford or any college is that, let me check this, 100% of people who don't apply don't get in. So shoot your shot. So why transfer to Stanford? Well, first of all, it's Stanford, and I don't really need to elaborate on that. But Stanford is an amazing school for transfers. Stanford loves transfer students. They understand that mostly transfer students are adults and that transfer students bring a perspective and a life experience that traditional students don't always bring and most often don't bring. No disrespect to traditional students, right? But coming out of high school, you have a certain perspective. But once you've gone out and lived some life, you've worked some jobs, you've had some kids, you've had some ups and downs, failures and successes. Stanford's really into that kind of stuff because they see transfer students as bringing a perspective onto campus that otherwise wouldn't exist. And so Stanford is very, very supportive of transfers. I remember when I arrived, we had a summer orientation kind of deal, and it was really like they rolled out the red carpet. And even when I arrived on campus for the first time before the start of classes, there's a brilliant transfer community, very supportive. The transfer support staff is excellent, and it's just a great place to go. Another great thing about Stanford is you don't have to choose your major, right? In a lot of schools that you're going to apply to, you're actually going to apply to the department. That's certainly true for the UCs, or, I can't speak to schools in other states, but definitely in the UCs, you're going to have to apply as a math major, as a physics major, as an English major, right? Stanford, that's not the case. You are admitted into the university and you are given the opportunity to explore before you choose your major. Now, you can choose your major as soon as you get in. You're going to have to qualify for it, but you're encouraged to explore. And on that note, it's an amazing school to learn and grow. Because there is this opportunity for exploration, you never know what's going to happen. So in my case, I was prepared for math. I had taken all the classes for a math degree. And what ended up happening was I'm actually not a math person, so I had to learn math from the start, and I did quite well in community college. But math at Stanford is not math at community college, and it's a totally different animal. And honestly, it was way over my head, and I was struggling. I earned a C in my linear algebra class. And fortunately, I was allowed to take that again, pass, no pass, to get that wiped off my grade. But had I been taking it for a grade the second time, I would have earned a C again. And I was working so hard at this class, I literally wasn't getting it. So thankfully, I took some design thinking courses, and I took another course called visual thinking, which was the very first class you would take as a product design major. And I discovered product design. And I think product design is an amazing way to go, especially if you want to make an impact, because it gives you access to pretty much any industry you want to work in and make an impact. That's a topic for another video, but moving on. So what do you think? You're too old? You think you're too young? No. And I want to say 2021 or 2022, the range for transfer students was 19 to 44 years old. So don't think you're being disqualified. They do not care how old you are or how young you are. Just make sure it's a good fit. A lot of this information I pulled together from a couple of different sources and my own experiences. One of the videos I pulled this from is a panel done by Alice Petty and the Dean of Stanford Admission. I will link that down below in the description. I highly encourage you to go watch that because there's a lot of good information there. And also you get a chance to meet Alice Petty in the video and the Dean of Admissions, and you can see for yourself the passion that these people have for transfer students. All right, so I highly encourage you to watch that. There's another great video by Joel Johnson, who was in my cohort of 2018. Joel Johnson is a veteran. I am not. And so we definitely are coming from two different perspectives here. There may be some overlap, but yeah, I'm going to be coming at this from a little bit of different perspective, but I'll link that down in the description as well. And I hope that you go watch that video as well. How can you be competitive getting into Stanford? Well, as I mentioned earlier, if you're just starting community college, start prepping now. Start thinking now about how you're going to spend your time at community college to make yourself competitive at Stanford. So according to the Dean of Admissions, the most competitive applicants have 2 years of applicable coursework. And by applicable, that means whatever your purpose is for going to Stanford, which you will be asked on your essay, you want your coursework to sort of match that, right? So if you're going in for biology, but all your coursework's in literature, you might not be the most competitive applicant. So you want to do the work and you want to get the good grades. Take tough classes and do well in them. Get involved in community college. Right? That doesn't mean you have to be the president of the student body or a founder of this company or president of this club, but just get involved. Show that you're a part of the community and contribute back to your community, because Stanford really wants to know who you are as a person, and they want to know what kind of contributor you're going to be to the Stanford community, not just how you're going to be in the classroom. Your coursework should reflect your goals, right? If you're going to be a physics major, get your math, get your physics. If you're going to be a computer science major, get your math, get your computer science. All right. This can change once you get to Stanford, and it likely will. But what we're focused on now is the application and how you're going to present yourself in the application. You want to have some breadth. All right. So don't just do math and computer science. Now, if you're on a 2-year timeline, you might have to do that. Right. But try to expand a little bit, maybe take a drama class or a communications class or whatever it is. All right. Now, in terms of how I involved myself at community college, I was a tutor. So after my 2 years of prereq work, I struggled through that. It was very hard. I did a lot of work to learn the material. And then once I was able to get up to my college level courses, I was eligible to be a tutor. And so I was a tutor, and I spent time as a math tutor, as a writing tutor, as a supplemental instruction leader, and as a growth mindset ambassador. And by doing that, I was showing leadership on campus, helping other students, guiding other students through their experience, and showing the schools to which I was applying that I was involved in campus life and that I was being a leader on campus. It's a good idea to get your foreign language out of the way. There is a foreign language requirement at Stanford, and that's going to be a 3-quarter requirement. When I was in community college, I was on a semester system, so that was 2 semesters of a foreign language. You don't have to get it done, but you're going to want to get that done, hopefully, before you get to Stanford, because that's just going to take up, however many units a foreign language class is for 3 terms, right? Jump on research opportunities if they're available. It's not required. I didn't have any research. I had done some presentations at a few conferences centered around student success and tutoring, but whatever your niche is, try to have some involvement in that. And again, got to get good grades. And think about it like this. Your grades are the price of entry, all right? Your grades are your prerequisite, but your essay is the major, because your essay is going to be the most important thing when it comes to being admitted to Stanford. Now, a lot of people have questions about affordability, and I think there's some misnomers about Stanford. This is certainly something I didn't understand when I was going through the admissions process. I didn't find out until later. But if you make under $100,000 in your household, Stanford will pay full tuition and full room and board. Now, that comes with the caveat. There will be a $5,000 student contribution expected per year. And if you can get another grant, if it's a Cal grant or some other scholarship like the Jack Kent Cooke Scholarship or any number of other scholarships that are available, that'll cover that gap. So Stanford has made it their mission to make sure that anybody who wants to go to Stanford can go to Stanford, so much as, as long as they're admitted and as long as they want to go. So that's pretty much that. Between $100K and $150K, they're going to pay your tuition. And maybe more. And then after 150K, it's on a sliding scale. So they're really focused on making sure that you can come to Stanford whether or not you can afford it. I will link some more information in the description on financial aid. So don't even think about not applying to Stanford if you can't afford it, because you can afford it. And if you think about it, if you're going to be at Stanford for 2 years and you have to actually take loans, you're going to pay $10,000 to go to Stanford. All right. If you're going to be there for 3 years, you're going to pay $15,000 to go to Stanford. Right. And probably if you're going to Stanford, you're probably going to be a great candidate for some scholarships. All right. So some stats. Stanford has an extremely low transfer rate. It's in the single digits. I say don't worry about that. Google has some information. It's slightly inaccurate from my understanding, from what I personally have seen. I don't know the admission numbers, but Google doesn't know them either, and the Google's numbers are a little bit low. I know for a fact that Stanford lets in a little bit more students than Google is saying, but not much. So you can expect that transfer rate to be around 2%. All right. So how do you differentiate yourself and get yourself into that 2%? That's a question you're going to have to answer yourself. But again, the most important stat, 100% of people who don't apply don't get in. So don't be in that group, because you're just selling yourself short. So for the application process, these are my tips now. Do not wait until the last minute. When the application opens, go into the Common App, find out what the essay questions are, and start preparing for them. Please don't wait for the last minute. I've heard people say that they did it last minute willy-nilly, and they got in and all this and that. Don't be that person, because it's probably not going to be you. Maybe they just wrote that fantastic essay on a whim. I wouldn't do that. But it's up to you. You can do your own style. One of the cool things about Stanford was it was the last school that I applied to. So I had a whole bunch of experience applying to colleges. All right. And I'd written a whole lot of essays. So you should have a lot of practice by the time you apply to Stanford. You will probably have applied to 10 or more schools by then, and you should be on your game. But really take it seriously. Get all the help you can get. If you can afford college prep, get it. If you really want to go to your advisors at your school, whether it's a community college or you're transferring out of a university, get all the feedback you can get on your application. This is the most important advice in this entire video. So please, if you skip anything, don't skip this. The essays are what are going to get you into college. Remember, the grades are your prereq, all right? You've got to have the grades, as I say, 3.8 or up, unless you have a very compelling story, 3.5. Stanford understands that you have kids. They understand you have a job. They understand that you can't necessarily, be involved at school on the time. You're going to have to tell that story. So you got to have the grades. And you've already done that at the time of application. So now what we're doing is we're writing essays and we're explaining to Stanford who we are as human beings, who we are as students, what are our goals, what are our passions, what do we want to get out of Stanford, all right, and what motivates us to be here. You're going to want to be very clear on your reasons and goals. There is a question that's going to ask you, why are you coming to Stanford? What are your goals and what do you hope to achieve? This is the single most important essay. It's not the only essay. Don't sleep on the other ones because they're very important as well. But you need to be able to articulate clearly how you've prepared, what you're going to do while you're at Stanford or what you plan to do and why. All right. So that's important. Now, in a future video, I may share my personal statement to Stanford. If that's something that y'all want to see, let me know down in the comments and I'd be happy to do that. Don't rattle off all your achievements. All right. Remember, you want to stand out, and there's going to be that group of people that has this award and that foundation and that company that they've started. You definitely want to talk about things that make you unique, your story unique. You're going to be up against anywhere from 2,000 to 3,500 other applicants. And there are going to be those who are going to be like, I get straight A's in this, and I'm the president of this club, and I got a 4.8 GPA and all this and that. Don't be that person. You can definitely mention your achievements and mention the things that you've done, especially those things that are important to you, and especially ones that are service to the community. But it needs to be within the framework of the narrative that you're setting, because the most important thing that you can do in your essay is tell a good story. All right. And really, you want to tell a compelling life story. For me, I didn't talk about all my struggles exclusively. I mentioned them, but I spent a lot of time talking about why I got into math and what I wanted to do with my math degree. And it wasn't to go be a teacher or be a mathematician, right? It had other goals. So you want to tell a great story, but just make sure that it's compelling. And if you don't have, a lot of hardship in your past, that's okay. Just tell a good story. I remember one video that I saw on YouTube. It was like the greatest essay that he remembers was a girl that talked about how she had done great in all her classes and, always was the top student. And then she goes into a music theory class and she couldn't grasp it and she couldn't understand B flat. And finally she flushed a toilet and it was in B flat and she woke up all her neighbors and, so it doesn't have to be like you overcame the darkest depths to get to where you're at. It just has to be a good story. If you have adversity, definitely that's a good way to go, identity, struggles you've overcome or how you've came to be where you're at, all that kind of stuff. Just make sure that it stands out. And again, talk with your trusted advisors because they can help you. Really important. Please, 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 please do not let ChatGPT write your personal essay. You have to write this essay in your voice. And I know how tempting it is to let ChatGPT do this work. Don't do it. It has to be your voice. Please write this essay. All right. There are ways that you can use ChatGPT to help you with this process, but do not let it write your essay because there will be students who are going to do that and those students aren't going to get in. All right. Because I can tell you right now, ChatGPT writing is pretty recognizable to anyone who uses ChatGPT enough. All right. So please don't use ChatGPT to write your essay. Use it to proofread, use it to brainstorm, use it to offer suggestions, but don't use it exclusively and don't let it write your essay. This has to be your voice. All right. It has to be your voice. Stanford wants to know who you are, and it is a holistic process. All right. So some of the essay questions that you can expect. Your personal statement is please provide a statement for reasons for transfer and objectives you hope to achieve. That's your big one. All right. And that's the one where you have to really articulate what you've done at school, why you've done it, and what you hope to achieve at Stanford. Don't just tell them you want to be there because Stanford's the best. You're not going to stand out by doing that. Another example could be, what piece of advice would you share for your younger self? And this is another one where, these admissions advisors and your admissions counselors, they love reading these essays. They're so engaged in the process. So it's really up to you to write essays that they love to read. And a lot of these are short essays. Describe what experience led you to this understanding, okay? What matters to you and why? I don't quite remember answering any of these. The essays that I remember answering, one was write a note to your roommate. And so I wrote a note to my roommate, and I assumed that they'd be reading it. And it was as sincere as it could possibly be. And I talked about problem resolution and communication, stuff like that. Another question they asked was, what do you look forward to most about being at Stanford? And I told them the truth. I look forward to being on campus amongst the trees and the architecture and just being there in this beautiful space. So it worked out. So some other helpful tips. Definitely you can contact the admissions office with questions. You will be able to talk to a human person. You shouldn't be on hold for too long. They won't be able to tell you the status of your application or any information like that, but they can absolutely answer questions. Go to the Stanford admissions website. I'll put a link for that down below as well. Tell them who you are. Don't tell them what you think they want to know, because what they want to know is who you are. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but tell them who you are. They read these applications. They read them front to back. They really, really care about these, and especially for transfer students. Be authentic, be yourself. Don't be afraid to let it all hang out there. There is no formula for transfer students. And again, I encourage you to go watch that video, the panel, it's a pre-med panel. It's very important because there's specific advice for transfer students and even more specific advice for community college transfer students. Something like 60% of the students they let in roughly are going to be from a community college, and another huge percentage of veterans as well. And remember, it's okay if you're not accepted, right? It doesn't speak to your value, it doesn't speak to your worth, and it doesn't speak to your strength as a candidate. Understand, 98% of the people won't be accepted as transfers, right? So make sure you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. Make sure that you have that set of schools that you know are going to be a good fit for you. And certainly if you're applying to Stanford, you've got the chops and it's going to work out. Okay. So if anyone has any questions or comments or criticisms, or if you want to say anything at all, if there's anything I left out, if there's anything you don't agree with, please leave a comment below in the comment section. I would love to hear your thoughts, and definitely if a follow-up video is warranted, I'd be happy to put one up. Okay, so do your best. If you would like to reach out to me personally, you can do that as well. Best of luck on your Stanford admission journey. Best of luck on your college application journey in general, and I'll see you next time.